Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics and the plans that Dominic Cummings and Boris Johnson have for tearing down the foundations of the UK are gathering pace, it seems. The latest call is for the overhaul or removal of the Electoral Commission. Now, this is an organisation that monitors electoral processes in the UK and investigates wrongdoing. Now, some Conservatives are a little bit upset because over the past few years, it has to be said, it has shown itself to be biased against political parties who break the law. I know, outrageous, isn't it? But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So the Electoral Commission, which called out and issued fines over breaches of electoral law for a number of political groups during the Brexit referendum, including very famously Boris Johnson's official Vote Leave campaign and Aaron Banks and Nigel Farage's Leave.eu, as well as calling out unlawful activities during general elections on the part of the Conservative Party, has come under attack from, well, guess who? Yes, that's right, those same Conservatives who were part of those groups that were caught out breaking the law. Now, when I first saw this, I wasn't really sure why they're so upset, because they completely got away with it, consistently. Yes, sure, they were labelled as lawbreakers, but it didn't void the results, and the follow-up criminal investigations have been stopped in their tracks as a result of the government threatening to pull funding from the police and the National Crime Agency. But upset they are. It's quite amazing, really, when you think about it, in both the UK and the United States, just how much the very people in complete control of government continue to shout and scream about being the victims. It's so unfair. Everyone's so mean to us. Oh, I know we have all the power, but everyone's still being mean to us. Absolutely outrageous, isn't it? That the Electoral Commission are picking on the Conservatives and pro-Brexit groups. How come they hardly ever have a pop at the other groups? I mean, they did have the pop at the odd pro-Remain group that also broke the law. But that was a much smaller proportion. No, not good enough. It's biased, I tell you. Disproportionately picking on the people who break electoral law. It's obscene. So, not content with trying to clip the wings of the highest courts in the land, politically appoint Supreme Court judges, remove some of the rights to a jury of your peers in certain cases, fiddling boundaries for constituencies and reducing the number of constituencies in areas that wouldn't generally vote Conservative, you know, so that they can win the next general election with an even smaller minority of the votes, preventing Parliament from being involved in the formation of new legislation, new trade deals, grabbing powers that are supposed to be devolved to more sort of local areas. The government is now thinking of overhauling or abolishing the Electoral Commission. The group that, even if it can't do much about it, can at least point out where groups have broken the law during an electoral process. And my first thought to this was to ask a question. So if you consider that these are the people who have actually broken electoral law during the 2015 general election, the 2016 Brexit referendum and the 2017 general election, there were also very, very dirty dealings going on in the spreading of disinformation during 2019 general election. But I don't necessarily know that any of that was unlawful because, as Parliament has said before, you know, electoral law is not fit for purpose these days, particularly with the advent of social media. But anyway, despite all the law breaking that we know has gone on over the past few years, no result was ever overturned and none of the people involved faced criminal proceedings. Like I said, groups were fined sums of money that were easily affordable to those who are bankrolled by billionaires. Now, you ask yourself, so if they completely got away with all that, all they've been doing so far, and that's what the Electoral Commission is for, you know, as it is now, what on earth are they planning to do in the future that means that they need to get the Commission out of the picture? What on earth are they planning? That's a moderately concerning thought. It would actually be a very worrying thought, but for all the other worrying thoughts that I have. New worrying thoughts have to wait in line and work their way up the ladder of concern right now. Then I started reading some reports on what others are sort of saying about this. Now, Labour and the Liberal Democrats are of the view that the reason for this and the timing of this is to prevent further investigations into the link between the Conservative Brexiteers and the Kremlin. You know, with the cat out of the bag, with the report into Russian interference being published, there have been calls for a proper investigation into Russia's attempts to interfere with our democratic processes. Now, the government have control over a lot of the organisations that could do this. Not really the Electoral Commission. So I suppose the accusation from opposition parties seems to be that the government want to nobble any organisation that might be willing to do this. Now, they managed to stop MI5, MI6 and GCHQ looking into it, but the Electoral Commission is a little bit more independent. Now, there is a review into electoral regulation, including, of course, the role of the Electoral Commission, by the Committee on Standards in Public Life. Now, there have been calls to give the Commission greater powers. You know, independent calls that they should be given greater powers, if anything, including the power to prosecute. The government want to avoid that at all costs. Now, a Conservative member of the committee said that the Commission should accept greater scrutiny or be disbanded. Now, that statement, taken in isolation, absolutely fine. Of course it should face scrutiny. There should always be scrutiny over such bodies by a committee of cross-party MPs, a select committee indeed. That's exactly what it should do. No problems there. There is a little problem, because the problem is that this particular Conservative, Amanda Milling, is not proposing such scrutiny. She is not talking about it facing the scrutiny of Parliament. No. She wants it to be controlled, not by a cross-party group of MPs, but by the government. She is proposing legislation that would mean the government defines the Commission's remits and goals, in her words. And another Conservative argued that, you know, it should just be abolished and their powers divided up between the police and Company House, which deals with businesses. Yeah, nice one. So what that would do, of course, is to further cast doubt on which organisation has to do something by blurring the lines of responsibility. Because that is exactly what prevented a proper investigation into Russian interference. Because you might say, well, why didn't MI5 investigate it? Well, MI5 thought, well, are we supposed to do that? What about MI6? MI6 got, what? Us? GCHQ, same thing. Because there's blurring of the lines, because there isn't a named group. God, right, if we've got these issues, it's your job to investigate them, because that doesn't exist. There are several groups that can investigate, but none of which that have to, which means no one does, because if there's political pressure on you not to investigate, it's too much trouble. If it's not even your definite duty to do so. So again, dividing up powers between two other groups instead of having one group means investigations are much less likely, because each group will go, well, do you know what, there's a lot of political heat on this, we don't really want to touch it. We'll just say, if anyone comes back to us, that they should have investigated it. You know. And also, by doing this, you'd be transferring those powers to bodies that are not in any way seriously independent of government either. Now, I would like to think that there would be just about enough MPs in the Conservative ranks who would object to such an assault on our democracy, because that's what it would be. But I doubt it. So when you consider some of the very harmful bills that Boris Johnson has already worked through the Commons, and I don't mean ones, you know, that are divided along Brexit lines, you know, ones that, you know, you could have voted against it and still been in support of Brexit, then I'd have no confidence that Conservative MPs would oppose this either, because it'll be very easy for them to play down the issue in the public, because that's where it will matter ultimately. If you look at all the U-turns that the government's had to make so far, they've all come as a result of public pressure on Conservative MPs, backbench MPs. But with this issue, I mean, the media, even the right-wing media critical of Boris Johnson, would not shine a spotlight on these issues. After all, those media, they may be against Boris Johnson's leadership, but they are not against the idea of the Conservatives being in power. They're very much in favour of that. And this move would help them keep their precious Tories in power long after Johnson is gone. So for my money, opposing this has to be, you've got to get an effective discussion going on in the public. You cannot expect enough support from the mainstream media. You know, sure, the likes of The Guardian and The Mirror will shine a spotlight on it, but it's too small a section of the popular media. You won't get the BBC really shine a spotlight on it. You might see something on Panorama, which hardly anyone watches. This is where you're going to need public interest groups and opposition political parties to really step it up. Unfortunately, at the moment, the way I look at things is these parties don't really have an effective social media campaign at the moment. Just as a little aside, when we're talking about polls this week, another poll has come out that showed that, yes, Boris Johnson's standing, his personal standing as a leader, has dropped in the country over the past month. So has Keir Starmer's. Still well ahead of Boris Johnson's, but it has dropped. And the reason for that, I would suggest, my hypothesis would be that he looks very effective when Parliament is sitting because he gets to show up the Conservatives on a weekly basis. The last month, Parliament has not been sitting. So how is he projecting himself out into the public? The only way you can do that is you've got to do it yourself, because there's no other avenue. You've got to do it yourself. That means Labour need an effective social media, group team. I don't think it's got it at the moment. It needs to get it quickly. And this is exactly the sort of thing it needs to get it quickly for, not just to boost up its own image and that of its front bench, but also to more effectively highlight campaigns such as this. But those are my thoughts anyway. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.